All right, welcome back to the Canadian Gun Vault. I'm sitting by myself tonight, and I just gave some things some thought that I think deserve the Canadian public's attention. And you don't have to be a firearm owner in order to appreciate this. I think that everybody should be interested. If you're a taxpayer, if you're a patriotic Canadian, if you're somebody that doesn't believe that the current government is making decisions that you can get behind, this advisory committee. I'm seeing a lot of talk. Floating around now, and certainly it's on the social media. I understand there's an e-petition that's circulating. Big thanks, Tracy Wilson, Rod Giltaca, and the CCFR crew for putting that one together. Obviously, we want to be heard, and that's one of the ways that we might be able to express ourselves, which I think is really important for firearm owners these days, and not only to express ourselves, but to express ourselves as a unit, as a cohesive group of people that are in agreement that the legislation as currently written is never made much sense, not since the 90s. Some people would argue before that, but definitely, the latest information coming from Parliament Hill and from the ATIPs, minutes of conversation between Ralph Goodale and the advisory committee. The latest thing that comes immediately and jumps out at my attention is the group of people that they've selected. Obviously know very little about guns and or just hate them. They are quite honestly the most slanted group of people I've seen in quite some time. They could argue that they put a few token firearm community members on that group, but clearly we're not going to get a shake that's fair in this particular adventure that is going to be the latest revision of the Firearms Act. So, having said that, I don't want to beat a dead horse. I think everybody knows that committee is completely biased, completely slanted. There's no way they're going to arrive at any objective conclusions. But I think more importantly, the subject should be one of, are they going to arrive at any intelligent ones? And if they're not going to be able to come up with intelligent solutions to gun-related violence, if they're only going to come up with things that further restrict good Canadians, why are we going to be paying them to do that? I don't understand how we, as a country, can allow this government to just do whatever they feel like, even if it doesn't make any sense. Certainly if rational or reasonable arguments are presented that indicate that this committee that's been selected is totally, like I said, biased. I mean, if we can make sound arguments that there's no way that a grouping of people like this can possibly generate anything that's going to be productive and or fair, that's really what Canadians, I'm sure, don't want to hear. That suddenly we've got a group of people that are about to deliver, probably the most unfair, unreasonable, poorly thought out, advice, if you want to call it that. There's the big argument that this group is just going to legitimize whatever it is that this government decides that they want to do with firearms owners this time around. I would suggest that certainly the e-petition is a great idea. Letting people know that this is happening is important, drawing a lot of attention to it. I would encourage anybody that hasn't signed that petition yet to do so. And if you want to put that out to your friends, if you've got friends that you've taken shooting, maybe you want to send them an email and say, sign up on this petition. There's a lot of us that have been going out to the range more and more often these days and bringing people out. And I'm seeing it more and more often, and it's awesome. We got firearms owners that are bringing their friends out in record numbers and making converts out of all these people. I would suggest that you send off an email to all the people that you know well enough to trust, and send off that email and let them know that this petition's floating around. I think it's definitely time to get some numbers. We've got a little bit of time, but I wouldn't suggest that you leave it too long, right? Find that petition online. I'm sure you'll be able to find it on Facebook, on the CCFR Facebook. You should be able to locate that e-petition and be able to spread that around to your friends. I think it's really important that everybody sign that and let the world know that we're not, as a firearm community, going to take this one laying down. If they're going to generate a committee that is going to be this ridiculous, in terms of how it could possibly be fair, if they're going to do that, then we're going to get as many people as we can, right, to try and put a stop to that. I think that having a petition signed to at least make it mandatory that the people involved in that committee get their firearm licenses. I think it's a great place to start, but I think more importantly, we should be attacking the possibility that they shouldn't be in those positions to begin with. I mean, if we put forward great choices and we can't even get interviews, for guys like Rod Giltaca, who's done so much for the firearm community, absolutely an incredible voice. And I really think that it's important that you, if you haven't done so already, join a lobby group like the CCFR that believe very firmly in putting the firearm community's best foot forward and getting us some good representation. I mean, if you got a buddy that's a hunter, if you got friends that want to go to the range, I think it's really important that you share with them how we're going to be able to, hold on to what rights we have left. Because with the generation of this committee, it looks like they're going to launch a full-scale attack on legal firearm ownership in Canada. So we should be doing our best to illustrate clearly that group was put together. It started by removing, reasonable representatives for the firearm community from the original committee, replacing them with people that may or may not have a clear and fair opinion of firearms to begin with. So if they're going to be able to put those people on the committee after removing people for having a bias, we should be able to clearly demonstrate that these people will have a bias. And I mean, Canada's founded on freedom, fairness, the right to be treated the same as everybody else. I mean, if this was any other segment of our Canadian culture, if we were going to put together a group of people that were going to advise on something like air traffic safety, we wouldn't put a plane crash survivor in there. They might just have airbags in every possible spot around you and have you wear 18 seat belts, and the plane won't be able to fly more than 4 inches off the ground and no faster than 100 miles an hour. I mean, you don't put people on the committee that quite possibly have just been horribly traumatized by firearms. I mean, that's the epitome of bias, and I mean, if we're not going to be fair, if we're going to allow them, because that's really what it'll come down to, folks. I think that we're going to be allowing them to put together this committee filled with people that have a poor opinion of firearms. If we're going to allow them to keep these people on that committee, right, then we deserve whatever we get. I think it's important that you call your member of parliament and let them know that advisory committee needs to be filled with a fair set of individuals. And, and I would suggest a couple of things. There is absolutely no way that there shouldn't be a member from each discipline. And when I say that, I mean, target shooters, hunters, some of the competition type shooters should be there in that group as well. I think having a member from every discipline, would be a great place to start when you're getting together a committee that's going to quite possibly generate legislation that could cost the taxpayers billions of dollars, potentially. I mean, because that's what happened last time the Liberals were in power and decided to create some firearm legislation. They put together a group of people that had very little knowledge of firearms, and they created a wonderful bit of legislation currently known as the Firearms Act. And what we got was the most ridiculous, nonsensical batch of difficult to enforce, subject to interpretation, and constant change rules that the legal firearm community had to abide by. I mean, it's difficult when you contact, God bless the CFO office, and they don't have the answer to the question, is that right or is that wrong? I mean, they're great people. They're fantastically knowledgeable, but unfortunately, they're subject to these constant changes. And, I'm sure a plethora of questions from firearm owners who are just interested in staying out of trouble. Unfortunately, they're probably very overworked and under-resourced. as many areas in government are at times, for them to have to respond to all these calls and questions constantly, and with these rules that are constantly changing, the 5-round capacity, no, 10's okay because it says pistol on the mag, and wait a minute, hold on, if it's 50 cal but you can fit 223 bullets in it, then you're allowed to have it, no problem, that's 14 rounds. So we went from 5 to 14. And then somewhere along the way, somebody got, excited about that and said, no, we're not going to allow that. So now it's 5 rounds again, unless it says pistol on the side of the magazine. But that's okay for now. I imagine it won't be long before they start to attack something like that. Or you could have 50 Beowulf, which is the actual cartridge that's supposed to go in the magazine, but you can only have 2, which really doesn't make any sense if you're only planning on loading Beowulf. So you've got these rules, that make no sense. And they were created by people that have no understanding of the law back in the 90s. And I mean, they're about to do it again. And of course, they deny that they're going to attempt to bring back a long gun registry. But the truth is, they'll just make it a long gun registry by another name. And again, taxpayers are going to be footing the bill for what probably is going to amount to a batch of rules that will make no sense again, and will be clearly made, in a fashion that won't be very favorable to the legitimate firearm community, and will probably have zero impact on the criminal element or gun-related violence that doesn't involve the legal firearm community, which is about 99% of the time. So you've got this group of people that know nothing about firearms and or hate them, and they're going to generate rules, much like the last group did, I'm sure, that are going to include bans and the recategorization of firearms. I understand that there's a new one that clearly Ralph Goodale's office and or the advisory group have been paying attention to the show. But they want to keep all prohibited firearms, in people's homes. So we're back to that again, where they're going to try and hide and force into the confinement of people's homes and collections. Some firearms and not others. So back in the 90s, they banned certain guns, and you had to turn them in for destruction, without any legal recourse. I mean, some people fought it, but they failed, to make a judge see the light back then. But since then, people have kind of come alive and realized that social media is in place, and that you actually aren't alone out there. You don't get a letter now in the mail with RCMP letterhead saying, turn it in or go to jail. Back in the early 90s and before the advent of great things like the internet, you really felt alone when you got that, notice. You'd never really seen RCMP, letterhead before. It's beautiful, crest. Right? But it's so intimidating when you open up that envelope and it says, by the way, you have something that could potentially result in you being locked up for 5 to 10 years should you decide to keep it. Turn it in or else. I mean, that's really what it came down to. And so people turn these things in for destruction. And then other people were told, you can keep them, but you're not allowed to shoot them anymore. And so what they did was they forced people to keep their firearms locked up inside, and for the most part, they weren't allowed to be transported to the range and to many locations without specific, explicit permission from the CFO's office for transport purposes, to get it to, say a gun show, or to take it to, gun shop for appraisal. But firing was almost exclusively thought to be out of the question for many years. I understand that the CFO's office, doesn't have any particular strong opinions about this when I've spoken to them. I don't want to single anybody out, but they've been pretty good about it. When I want to talk about guns, they're very friendly people if you actually give them an opportunity to speak a little bit. And, now hearing that Ralph Goodale has been advised that all prohibited firearms should be restricted from being transported to the range to be used and enjoyed the way they were meant to be. So, I mean, for all you people out there that have bought a gun that really like using it, just realize that a group of undereducated people, right, in this advisory group are going to advise the government, right, who probably already have their agenda and want to do certain things, but they're going to advise these people to potentially take your favorite gun and tell you that you may be allowed to keep it if we decide to let you keep it, or you may never be able to take it out of your gun safe again because we said so. And really, there won't be any reason for it. Right? They won't give you any reason. I can tell you that right now. They didn't back in the 90s. If we force them to give us a reason, it's not going to make any sense because there won't be any difference between the ones that they pick and the ones that they don't, other than thinning out the herd a little bit. And so just realize that to have a group of people already advising, that prohibited firearms are going to be severely restricted and will not be traveling to and from the range is just a repeat of something we saw in the 90s. And it's certainly something that I think is completely avoidable if we manage to get a group of people in that advisory committee that are going to be fair. Since we know they're not going to be fair, and since Canada was founded on freedom and the ability to, be treated the same way as everybody else, I say we insist. I say we call into our members of parliament. I say we call into Ralph Goodale's office, and we let them know, right, that there is absolutely no way that a committee like this should be allowed to operate, right? If we're going to have any kind of fair legislation generated, we need, at the very least, an advisory committee that the government can ignore completely, because I'm sure that's what they'll do. If we get ourselves a honest to gosh, good bunch of people there that have no interest in, unnecessarily restricting the firearm community in Canada, and realistically want to do something to have an impact on crime that may involve firearms. Let's get that group in there, and let's let them advise the government so that they can completely ignore whatever it is that they say, because I can't think of a better way, right, to expose this government for the unfair bunch of people that they can be at times, than by having a committee that advises them of one thing and they do something completely different. Right, I have my feelings about this. I think that most people, may not look that far ahead, but I think that it's really important that we stop this committee from advising any further until they do the bare minimum, and then we have them qualified. If we're going to be spending potentially billions of tax dollars, I want to know that the person who's going to be advising the government knows what the heck they're talking about. So I would suggest that we get ourselves a group of experts together, and we insist that any member of the advisory committee, right, is going to be interviewed by people that represent the firearm community, potentially the 2 to 2.5 million people in this country that might be affected by the law. I think we have a right to say what goes on. And so in order to address this issue, again, I'm going to encourage everybody to call into the member of parliament, call into Ralph Goodale's office, right, and let them know, right, that you do not agree with the generation of this committee as it is right now, and that you are going to insist, right, along with a lot of other Canadians, right, that this stop and be changed. If you call in and you take the 2 minutes it takes to speak to somebody, if everybody calls in, I can almost guarantee you we'll get noticed. We'll get noticed. We'll slow down their offices, right? They'll have to deal with us. They'll have to deal with us fairly. It will draw attention to us. And when Canada takes a look and says, well, what's the problem? We can say, well, we've got a group of people that are about to advise, right, in a capacity that could have an impact to the tune of billions of taxpayers' dollars, and we believe they know nothing about the things that they're advising on. I think that might have an impact on the selection of the new committee. Just a thought. But if you take the time to call your member of parliament and Ralph Goodale's office and express yourself, right, that's where things begin to change. Anyway, that's about all the time we have for tonight. And that's my 2 cents going in the vault. Night, folks.